I just wanted to introduce really quickly why we're doing this panel. For many years, Coptic Solidarity has faced issues with the Egyptian government foreign lobby. But we didn't really understand how it worked very well, and all these different incidents would happen, and it was hard to put it together. So I started doing some research recently, and I found this great report by the Quincy Institute for Responsible Statecraft, and also started looking at the citations in that report, where we discovered Open Secrets, an organization that follows and tracks foreign lobbying. And also the other speaker, Rad Jar, who's not here right now, he's also an expert in that. But we wanted to give a bigger picture of how it works, because this is relevant to a lot of the other communities who face foreign lobby, right? Whether it's in Iraq or whether it's in Qatar, you know, other countries, it's a problem. But we also wanted to give some specific country examples. So that is one of the reasons that we have Aram, who is with the Armenian community, and then Mark Basta, who is with Coptic Solidarity. So let's start with Ben. Dan, I'm so sorry.
Ben couldn't make it.
Ben couldn't make it, okay. Dan, who is a senior researcher at Open Secrets. He's responsible for overseeing Open Secrets databases, tracking lobbying activity, and the revolving door, and directs the Foreign Lobby Watch program, launched in 2017. He joined Open Secrets in 2004 and has specialized in monitoring political action committees and the personal finances of government officials. Dan graduated from the University of Delaware with degrees in political science and in history.
Thank you. I appreciate being invited to be a guest here today. Open Secrets is really the preeminent source of data on money and politics. We track everything from campaign contributions to lobbying, of course, foreign influence that we're going to talk about today, as well as even the personal finances of politicians. So today I'm going to give kind of a brief overview of some of the resources available to track foreign influence, especially those that we specialize in at Open Secrets. The main law of interest here is the Foreign Agents Registration Act, or FARA, which was passed in 1938 as a response to communist and Nazi propaganda being spread in the US. And to that end, it's actually quite broad and detailed in terms of what gets reported. It covers a lot of different types of activity. At Open Secrets, we've titled our project Tracking FARA Data Foreign Lobby Watch, but really a lot of what gets reported relates to other things like tourism and trade promotion, in addition to what we think of as more traditional lobbying. Now, FARA requires anyone to report who is a foreign government, foreign political parties, non-US citizens, any of these people who are trying to undertake an influence operation in the US is required to file. And also all kinds of partnerships, associations, companies, really if their base is outside the US, they are required to file. There are a few exemptions, like for purely diplomatic work or commercial. Another major exemption is the LDA exemption. LDA is the Lobbying Disclosure Act, which is the main disclosure system for lobbying in the US. If you are a company based overseas, you can choose to file under LDA instead of FARA. So if you're trying to investigate some links and you expect to find something in FARA for an organization, you might want to also try the lobbying LDA data. So all of these foreign interests, or what are called foreign principals, they have to record, of course, who they are, the money they're spending, and expenses that go towards their influence campaign, and the purpose of that money. They actually describe what they're doing. The people that they hire here in the US also have to file their campaign contributions, which can be helpful for determining kind of what links they're paying for. And perhaps the most rich source of information here is that they have to include copies of any mass communication that they distribute, which really just means it goes to more than 2 or 3 people. So that's things like posters and flyers, but also digital communications like social media posts, email newsletters, ad campaigns, of course. And those things are a rich source. They serve as kind of an archive of, over time, of what these people are representing. You know, things like email newsletters will kind of disappear into the ether, and really anything on the web can disappear. But they have to file physical copies of these things with the Department of Justice, which allows you to kind of look back in time at what they've been working on. I mentioned campaign contributions. Campaign contributions directly from non-citizens are, of course, not allowed. But the agents here in the US who are representing foreign interests do have to report them. Anything reported to the FEC, the Federal Election Commission, you'll find on Open Secrets as well. If you're trying to find out where a politician or a member of Congress stands, for example, you can come to our site and see all kinds of information about how much they've raised and spent, what industries are giving to them, and we have tools that show you stats for a congressional committee as a whole, or of course you can look at individual members. And I wanted to touch on kind of some of the reasons for optimism over the last several years in terms of transparency and accountability in FARA. Some of the good things that happened are, like 10 years ago, advisory opinions from the Department of Justice were not available publicly, except for a handful that leaked out or were posted. And in 2018, the Department of Justice finally made those public, and they're available on the website now. Those are what they are answers from the Department of Justice to questions from people filing, and they shed a lot of light on what we can expect to find in these reports, what people are disclosing and not, and kind of what the position of the Department of Justice is. In terms of prosecution, the FARA law has seen very little prosecution in terms of cases being brought. From 1998 to 2018, there were only 10 prosecutions under the FARA law. But around 2016, 2017, they started prioritizing enforcement again, and there were over a dozen cases brought over the last 3 years. And as a result of that, we've seen more people filing. Enforcement is really crucial to getting accurate filings, an accurate picture of the activity they're undertaking. And without the threat of that consequence, a lot of people will avoid reporting. Unfortunately, one item that causes me some pessimism is that earlier this year, Attorney General Bondi issued a memo that basically pulls back on all that enforcement, and they really are only going to focus on like espionage type foreign influence. And AG Bondi herself worked as a lobbyist for Qatar in the past. And Ben Freeman, who we briefly referenced, he's a expert, really more so than I, on FARA and foreign interests. He literally wrote the book on FARA. He found that since that memo was issued, we've seen a drop of 30% in the number of filings. So the enforcement really has a lot to do with how complete a picture we get. So I wanted to use the example of the Kurdistan Regional Government to kind of show what you can find in these reports. KRG has been spending around $3 million a year in the US since 2016. They had a couple years with a steep drop-off in 20 and 21. But in 2024, they're back over 3 million. They send out a lot of email newsletters, they do social media, and but most importantly, they report dozens of meetings with congressional staff and executive branch officials, including the Department of State, the Energy Department, and the Pentagon. And then there are even more calls and meetings with nonprofits and think tanks, significant outreach at US universities, which Congressman Wolf mentioned earlier. That is kind of one of the more unique pieces of the way KRG does their operation. They're certainly not the only one. Countries like China and Qatar definitely follow a similar strategy. Some other countries, like China and Russia, have entire media companies that are producing content, video, print, and radio. KRG of course, doesn't have that level of resources maybe, but that's another thing you would want to look at. We learned from their filings that they hired the Chartwell Strategy Group to work on their behalf, paid them $25,000 a month to do a bunch of media outreach and consulting. And one of the individuals working for them was a fundraiser for President Trump's first presidential campaign. So that's also quite common for consultants and lobbyists hired to have political connections or a professional background that includes working for the government, which is referred to as the revolving door. And just to kind of jump and make a final point, I did want to go a little bit beyond FARA to point out the defense connections here. Large weapons sales are reported and available at the State Department's Office of Defense Security Cooperation Agency website, and in a more accessible form from the Forum on the Arms Trade. KRG and Iraq have this defense relationship with the US, buying arms, including F-16s and howitzers directly, and getting training and military assistance from the US as well. The KRG has been given arms directly, sometimes over the objections of Baghdad. And since 2023, the US has sold at least $500 million worth of large arms to Iraq and over $7 billion to Egypt, and that's not even mentioning others like in the region like Saudi Arabia and Turkey and UAE. Over the years, our research has found that a lot of the same governments that are spending millions of dollars on influence operations in the US are then approved to buy these billions of dollars worth of weapons, and the US defense industry that's selling them to them are also spending over $100 million on lobbying. And of course, those sales and how the weapons end up being used have effects that are diplomatic, political, and of course humanitarian, and affect the stability of the region, among other things. So it's important that we strive for accountability and transparency in that realm as well. And I'll end there. I look forward to hearing what my fellow panelists have to say.
Thank you. It's really helpful to understand that foreign influence includes more than just lobbyists, like you mentioned, like the emails, and like there's so many aspects of it. So I think our panelists who are going to talk country specific will maybe give us some more of those examples of how it's conducted. I want to introduce Aram Hamparian, who also spoke at our conference last year. He's the executive director of the Armenian Committee, National Committee of America. There we go. And he is the national point person with administration, Congress, media, with foreign embassies, and in cooperation with Eastern and Western U.S. regional offices, he oversees more than 60 local chapters, dozens of coalition partners, hundreds of community affiliates, and thousands of grassroots activists. And he works daily on a broad range of legislative, policy, research, political, campaign, media, coalition, and community-related concerns.
Thank you, Lindsay. We are blessed to be partners with Solidarity and Coptic Solidarity. No. Okay. It's a blessing to be here. Far more important than the bio that Lindsay read is that we're brothers and sisters in Christ. The Armenian and Coptic peoples are part of the Orthodox family, part of the Eastern Orthodox family, part of the Eastern Oriental Orthodox family, so close that I can take the Eucharist in a Coptic church. My daughter, who's here, if she chose, could be married in a Coptic church. If God should strike me dead, the last rites could be administered by a Coptic priest. So we're very close. We are brothers and sisters. And for that reason, I will speak with the frankness and bluntness of brothers and sisters. Okay. The topic today is foreign influence. My 2 cents on foreign influence, especially in the context of the Coptic American community, is that the best defense against foreign influence is a good offense. Keep the others on their back foot. Always lean into the conflict. Don't hang back and respond. What is the problem you face? The problem you face is that you're dealing with a very powerful nation. You're dealing with the government of Egypt and all the geopolitical leverage that a country like Egypt has. You bring to the table something very different, right? You're a community, you're not a state, you're a church, not a government. The asymmetries are dramatic. Like, that's number one. Like, don't think this should be toe-to-toe, this for that. It's not an exchange or a transactional thing. It's highly asymmetrical. What you have is, very often, and this is something the Armenians have dealt with, which is policies written abroad, exported to Washington, and then enforced by presidents, administration after administration after administration. Your answer to that, I would argue, falls into 3 categories, 3 very old categories, and I think Aristotle listed them, how many, 2,500 years ago. Your logos, your pathos, and your ethos. Your logos is the best argumentation that you can bring, and I'm sure you've developed the best argumentation you can bring, but you know that there's a ceiling on that in a city like Washington, which is very interest-driven. But nonetheless, the logos, super important. You got to present the facts and evidence in as compelling a way as possible. The second is your pathos, which is the emotional appeal, which is, look what's happening to these people. They have been martyred nonstop for centuries. Open your heart, help save this ancient nation. This is an appeal that we've made also for years. But also we know that in a city like DC that very few people have risen to places of decision-making in a city like this who are soft-hearted. So you have to be measured in how realistic and how much the appeal to emotion will actually deliver in terms of policy. Doesn't mean you don't appeal to emotion, that you don't make a moral case, but understand, you go into that process with eyes open. I think the third basket, not your logos, not your pathos, which is your ethos, which is your credibility, that's really where the Coptic community's strength lies and where you have the best chance of pushing back against foreign influence. And I think Coptic Solidarity does a great job of that. And that would be something like, what is your electoral credibility? What is the strength of your constituency? how are you stakeholders in the American enterprise? And the answer is, you are very considerable stakeholders in the American enterprise. My best estimate, and I'm an outsider, is something like 200 parishes across the country. I would guess, with the vast majority having been established, consecrated, ordained, whatever, since the 80s. Like, this is not a community that was here in the 20s, 30s, 40s. This is within the last 50 years. 200 parishes have been stood up with representation, obviously focused in different cities, but spread out across the country. So it's a very asymmetrical battle, but one where I think you get the most value when you organize politically, and when your ethos is strong, when your credibility is strong, when you're viewed and even feared as a group that can affect a political outcome that these people care about, right? I love Frank Wolf, I love French Hill, and there are 2 of maybe 10 members on the Hill that you can count as sincerely interested in these issues. The rest are politicians. So that's my first words of advice, which is focus on the electoral relevance of the community. That's what will translate into policy in ways that your argumentation and your moral appeals may not. That's number one. Number 2, taking sides. I think that the Coptic community, like the Armenian community, is often pulled in different directions. How close are you, or how far are you from the president? How close or far are you from the Democratic Party or the Republican Party? Maybe back home, how close or far are you from the government in Cairo? Like, it's a question of, like, where do you align in the universe of big powers that will influence our destinies, right? And I would answer that question with a phrase I give in Armenian to every student group that comes through Washington, D.C. We get hundreds and hundreds of Armenian students through our offices, and I say in Armenian, and I'll tell you in English, maybe you can translate it as well, but we say, Menk Hurchenk Aistuni Mech. We are not guests in this house. And by this house, I mean this room, this Congress, this city, this country. If we, as Armenians, I'll speak just for the Armenians, if we view ourselves as immigrants or foreigners or an ethnic group asking for a favor, we'll never get anything done, right? If we show up as confident stakeholders, we'll get everything done. Like that basic, and I know that everyone in this, you're here because you understand that and you believe that, right? But that's something that we need to ripple out into the community and empower Coptic Americans, Armenian Americans, all our other friends and allies who might somehow lack the full confidence of American citizens, right? That this is our place as much as anybody else's. I also tell the kids about the architecture of Washington. Look at this room, right? This room is a beautiful room. To get here, we have to walk up marble steps. We walk through these big columns. It's all designed for home field advantage. It's all meant, I don't mean this in a bad way, but it's all meant for somebody like me who's raised in New Jersey, comes to Washington, walks into beautiful rooms like this to somehow feel like small and the city feels big and the person on the other side of the table is the decider and I'm the supplicant or petitioner. That whole power balance is just it's a psyop, it's a game. And I think very important for us to educate our communities that this is our place, this is our home as much as anybody else's. I think that empowering idea held firmly by everyone here, but a message that we need to deliver over and over and over again. A few more thoughts and I'll wrap up. I tend to think that our issues do best when there's more sunshine. We make progress when people are paying attention. We are almost unfailingly betrayed in the shadows. If a decision is made behind closed doors, in Congress, at the State Department, at the Defense Department, invariably that decision will be at our expense. If those decisions are drawn into the sunshine, right, we tend to do very well. So we should be pulling the dialogue, the debate, the discourse on our issues into the public arena under the bright light of day. And I guess a last thought, then I want to end with a quote. Flex the electoral muscles of the community. Send the message out that your votes need to be earned. Highlight over and over and over again how many votes there are. There are enough elections in this country that will be decided by 5,000, 10,000, 20,000 votes. The math is less important than the messaging. The math is less important than the messaging. Don't get caught up in, oh, we're small, or oh, there aren't enough. Message relentlessly that in the states where the Coptic community is present, we may play a role in deciding the governor, the senator, even the president. That flex, I think, very powerful. And I will wrap up with my all-time favorite quote, which I used to memorize. I used to be able to memorize it, but as my hair has gone gray, my memory has gone weak. So it's a quote that you can find at Union Station. If any of you took the train to Washington, you may have passed through Union Station. Tucked away in a corner of Union Station is a statue of a great hero. His name was A. Philip Randolph, and he organized labor unions, including the porters, that helped transport Americans all over the country. A real hero. Maybe Martin Luther King wasn't Martin Luther King without A. Philip Randolph doing a lot of the work behind the civil rights movement. And underneath his statue are just a few short words which I like to read to you. At the banquet table of nature, there are no reserved seats. You get what you can take, and you keep what you can hold. If you can't take anything, you won't get anything. And if you can't hold anything, you won't keep anything. And you can't take anything. And you can't take anything without organization. My friends, that organization is Coptic Solidarity. Thank you very much.
Wow, thank you, Aram. We really look to your work and your organization as an example of what we would like to become, in the sense of how well you're organized. And last year you gave us very specific ideas about how to organize better. And so again, thank you, because we will implement your ideas. Our third panelist is Mark Basta. Mark is a research associate with Coptic Solidarity. He previously interned with us. He just graduated a couple weeks ago with his bachelor's in political science, 1 year early, from UC Berkeley. He has written now 2 reports with Coptic Solidarity. He's going to be sharing about one that is soon to be published. And he's also worked with us at the UN, and this year he gave our very first speech at the UN Permanent Forum on Indigenous Rights. So we are very proud of him and really grateful for everything that he's done.
Thank you so much, Lindsay. Thank you so much. Well, the past 2 speeches were so good, I don't even know what I'm doing here. But I will try my best to give you some findings of the latest report that I've been writing. It hasn't been published yet, but it has kind of quantitative data. We tried to quantify the Egyptian lobby here in DC, and I'll just get right into it. I think Lindsay gave a good introduction to what really inspired this project. So there are 3 main sources that I relied on. I think the first one is what Dan was talking about, FARA and the FARA filings. And I focused specifically on the period from 2014 to the present. So it was around February 2025 was the latest filing. The other 2 sources that I think are very relevant as well are the Department of Education's foreign gift and contract data. And this is under Section 17 of the Higher Education Act of 1965. Which basically mandates that the department, that any school that receives more than $250,000 a year has to disclose semi-annually the contributions or the gifts that they've received. And the last source is the Office of the Clerk for the House of Representatives. They publish a report quarterly about the trips that are made by members of Congress and their employees and staff. And so here are the findings. So between October of 2013 and February 2025, there has been 13 entities that have represented different branches of the government of Egypt. Most common is the Foreign Ministry. Over that period of time, the government, those firms, those entities have conducted 5,500 political activities on behalf of Egypt. Political activities refers to emails, calls, meetings, meeting requests, and so that was the number. And Egypt has spent $18.8 million in that time period for its lobbies. As of right now, there are 3 main registrants that represent Egypt, and these are Brownstein Hyatt Farber Schreck, Holly Strategies, and Dr. Andrea Zeki, who is the head of the Protestant churches of Egypt. As for universities, between 2012 and 2013, that is when Cairo hired a lot of firms and spent the most money in that last decade. It also did the same thing in 2020 when President Biden did the same thing and was also threatening to cut aid based on human rights issues and Egypt's failure to improve human rights situation, as well as with arbitrary detentions. The second most important issue that Egypt focused on was regional influence. And this has particularly been relevant more recently. Egypt has often hired firms to bring DCs to basically align Congress and the State Department with its positions on certain issues in Africa and the Middle East. So around 2022, they conducted huge activities about the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam. They hired a lot of firms to basically come to Congress and inform congressional offices about Egypt's position. A lot of these contacts also included a lot of informational material, which Dan was also referring to, basically spreading mass communication about why Egypt is on the right side. And the same thing has been increasing about Gaza as well. So they've been increasing contacts. This has been mainly actually one of the most main reasons why we've seen a resurgence back up in the Egypt lobby. They have also disseminated Egypt's plan for Gaza through the FARA filings. So we see that going out for Congress. It's also recorded with FARA. And so that has been a very huge issue for Egypt, hiring firms on a issue-to-issue basis regarding regional influence. The third most important issue, and I think that one's probably the most relevant, is reputation laundering. Egypt has spent money and has worked with partners based in Cairo to try and present an image that, since the assumption of the current president of the presidency, Egypt has taken genuine efforts for progress in human rights situation and to present a false narrative to DC that the Cairo administration has accomplished tolerance in Egypt. So I think one of the most significant activities that I've found was the hiring of Dr. Andrea Zeki, and the current head of the Protestant churches of Egypt. He has been working reportedly on a volunteer basis. Has conducted about 24 political activities since 2022. And most of his activities have been going to congressional offices, State Department desks, and United Nations offices, as well as religious leaders over here in the United States, according to his filings, to discuss progress on religious freedom in Egypt, as well as progress on women empowerment. The analysis that we found, I'll try to get to those points pretty quickly, but the main points that we found that are unique to Egypt's lobby, the first thing is that Egypt conducts more of an episodic targeted lobbying mission strategy. So unlike the UAE or Qatar, Egypt focuses more on having less of a steady activity in DC and more of a case-by-case basis. So for instance, when the aid was cut off, they hired 3 firms to bring it back up. With the Jerd crisis, they hired more firms. When the Gaza war started, they also hired firms. So it's a very case-by-case basis, and you can really see it as less of a steady presence, more of a very dependent on what's happening. The second thing is that Egypt's campaigns are both multi-target and they heavily rely on revolving door. The first thing, multi-target, Egypt has reached out to multiple stakeholders in US policy instead of just focusing on Congress. So they have published a lot of papers through US media outlets. They have, through their lobbying firms, essentially. So they would disseminate a lot of articles to basically influence the American public and their view of Egyptian issues and of regional issues. I've also reached out a lot to think tanks who inform our congressional offices and our government on many issues. They have been very focused on targeting think tanks, especially bigger ones here in DC. Concerning revolving door, just a little definition for that. Revolving door basically means when you work for the government and then switch to lobbying right after leaving the government. That's essentially the definition of it. And so Egypt has really relied on former congressmen and their employees who work for some of those lobbying firms to do the work for them. And most famously, Representative Edward Royce, former Representative Edward Royce, has been one of the most essential partners in bringing back up the congressional visits to Egypt. He's also used a lot of his connection as former chairman of the House Foreign Affairs Committee to bring a lot of visits for the ambassador as well as to Egyptian officials. Another staffer has been Nadim al-Shami, who's the former chief of staff of Speaker Nancy Pelosi, who also used his position to bring a lot of different favors for a lot of different meetings for Egyptian government parties to discuss a lot of the issues that I was just talking about. The third finding is that firms tend to underreport for Egypt. So 5 out of the 13 entities that represented Egypt have very poorly reported their FARA filings. So although FARA lists how you should report, there is some loopholes. So for example, in your political activities, even though some firms do tend to fill out the form properly and list out every email, every call, which is how it's supposed to be, some firms only mention the activities very vaguely. And so 5 out of the 13 that represented Egypt in the last decade have not followed suit with the proper filing way, which is technically not compliant, but has been very ambiguous and has made our job very much harder, so as for pretty much any civil society to really look at the filings, which really connects back to the 5,500 political activities number, is that that is only a baseline. So it is most likely much, much more than this. And the last finding is that Cairo utilizes transnational Christian leadership to improve its image. Egypt has used its own institutions, its own religious institutions, to conduct reputation laundering over here in the United States. We assume that it's by a lot of pressure on those religious leaders, but they've also connected with religious leaders and American evangelicals over here. During the first Trump administration, after the threat to cut the aid to Egypt, a lot of US evangelicals, including President Trump's own informal advisor, Johnny Moore, who is currently the Gaza Humanitarian Fund Executive Director, and a lot of other evangelicals, as well as Dr. Andrea Zeki, had a visit with President al-Sisi. Right after that visit, the aid to Egypt was fully reinstated, with absolutely no reason for it to be, because there had been no improvements in that time period. And so we've been seeing that the Christian network, especially based here in the United States, has been, whether intentionally or unintentionally, complicit in the line of reputation laundering and image management for Egypt to distort the image of how Egypt has been dealing with Coptic issues back home. I think these are all my points, and yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you. We're looking forward to the publication of the report. There's just so much information that I think will blow people's minds. We are running a little behind, and some of the members of Congress, as I said, they change when they're going to come. I think our plan is, if I could just ask our panelists to give a final remark, if there's a recommendation you want to make, or comment on what another speaker said. If you could each take just a couple minutes to do that, and then we will have lunch here, because if members do show up, it'd probably be easiest if we're all seated eating, and they could just come in and give their remarks. So would you like to give any final comments?
Sure. I think as far as recommendations, like as Mark said, there are a lot of non-compliant filings, and we kind of depend on how complete they make them. And I mentioned the importance of enforcement. There's actually no civil penalty system for FARA filings, and adding that would definitely help, add something to compel people to file properly that doesn't rise to the level of criminal prosecution. So I think my final comment is to emphasize enforcement.
First, just an offer of renewed friendship and cooperation. We're available, 24/7 on any front to be helpful, whether it's a Coptic-specific issue or maybe a Christian rights issue. We're available to help. Number one, I'll just reiterate a point I made earlier, which is you will get pulled in different directions, and you'll be called upon to take sides. And that's understandable. And you're going to find people who have different views of U.S. policy, different views of U.S. politics, a whole range of issues. But just somewhere, and I think Coptic Solidarity is that place, right? That's the place where when you take sides, it's the Coptic side. It's the Coptic side. That's the side to take, and call upon others to join with you in supporting the survival, the welfare, the well-being of an ancient Christian nation. That is a worthy cause, and it need not be subordinated, it need not be derivative of other causes. There's great causes in the world. All the left and right and all the politics, the geopolitics, and all the great nations are all going to play in a million different directions. Somebody's got to pull for the Coptic nation, and that's those of you who are here today in this room.
Well, I think I've kind of spit a lot of facts and details, so I think I'll have a chance to kind of give a bit of a reflection over this. I think a lot of this has at first made me feel like we're really fighting a mountain when we try to talk about Coptic activism. I mean, we're talking about tens of millions of dollars standing in front of, the little Coptic community that is trying its best to bring a voice for the unheard. But I think that one of the most important things is for our members and for Coptic Solidarity and for any group based in the Middle East to just push forward, especially with so much pressure under the people that we assume are representing us. And I'm speaking specifically, for example, for the clergy and the religious leaders, for example, in Copts' perspective, that has been one of the largest problems, is assuming that our Coptic clergy or our Coptic religious leaders have been, by default, taking a side of protecting and speaking up for Copts under a regime that has put a lot of pressure and has been heavily controlling our religious institutions. It is up for civil society to keep pushing forward. It is our only option as of right now, and I think I'll just end with that.
Well, thank you so much to our panelists. I'd just like to mention the organizations' names again, because they all have great information. So Open Secrets and the Armenian National Committee of America. Did I say that right? Yes. And our new report will probably be coming out next week, hopefully.